Hello and welcome back to another episode of DCLA Scenarios. If you didn't see my last video, this is basically that I present a scenario of something that could have happened in one of the shows while I am doing a speed paint in the background. I'm not a professional painter in any ways, like my pictures will be pretty cartoonish and not very realistic, but you know what? I enjoy drawing, and today's drawing will be of Diego making Tomas trip because I thought that would be funny. And it's very fitting for today's episode because the scenario we're going to speculate about today is what if Tomas stayed? If you didn't know, Tomas was supposed to be the original endgame for Violetta in season 1 at least. The reason why it didn't become like that was because the actor for Tomas didn't really get into the role. He had too much homesickness, so he decided to move back to Spain. This caused them to have to change the entirety of the show, and eventually Violetta ended up with Leon. And personally to me, Tomas leaving was the best decision the show ever made, because I think season 2 is so much better than season 1. I feel like in season 2 the show really takes off. I would say like season 1 is just a prequel and season 2 is the main story, and then season 3 is a sequel that it's not as good. And I think much has to do with Tomas leaving. I also, to be honest, think that if Tomas stayed, I am not sure how it would have worked. But today we're going to go through some scenarios of what could have happened if Tomas had stayed. And I will try to not be too biased, because as many people know, Tomas is not a character that many of us like, but there are still people that do very much like him and Violetta and wish that they would have been endgame. In my personal opinion, I think the show would have been worse if they were endgame, but that's just me. I will try to keep my biases aside and be more open-minded, I guess. We will start directly with scenario 1. And scenario 1, I would say, is everything is the same except Tomas stayed. And because everything is the same, it means that in the end Leonetta will be the endgame ship. This means that the show will do something similarly to what happened in Soiluna, where they essentially only have 2 main love interests, and every season ending will have one of them be together with the character. So in Soiluna, season 1 ended with her and Matteo kissing, and season 2 ended with her and Simon hugging, so it was kind of a Lumon ending, even if they didn't explicitly do anything romantic, but it was kind of to keep it open that maybe she isn't gonna end up with Matteo. I mean, in Soiluna it was pretty clear that she was going to end up with Matteo, but for all of season 2 they kind of teased, what if she was actually gonna end up with Simon instead. However, in Violetta, I feel like they actually, at least in season 1, made it pretty unclear who Violetta would choose. So from this scenario, we will say that everything in season 1 is the same. She ends up choosing neither of them. But in the beginning of season 2, the love triangle sort of starts again. No one is quite sure what to do, and in this mess comes Diego. I wanna say right off the bat, I won't do a scenario in which Violetta is endgame, and that is simply because the show is very clear that Diego and Violetta will never be endgame. I love Diego much more than what I do with Tomas, but the show is very clear that Violetta would either have an endgame with Leon or with Tomas. They are pretty clear that with Diego, he will be an obstacle and he will work as drama for the love triangles, but him and Violetta will never be endgame. But I think what would happen if both Leon and Tomas stayed in season 2, they would kind of form an unlikely friendship. Because you know for a fact both of them would dislike Diego, so they would gang up on him together. I think, however, Violetta would have a much more dramatic time. I think that in canon, she was pretty sure from the beginning of season 2 that she wanted to be with Leon, but now when Tomas also stays, I think that she kind of does not really want to pursue any of them, and so she kind of tries to enjoy the single life, but then Diego keeps interrupting her everywhere. And the thing with Diego is that I love the guy, but in the beginning of season 2, his approach to Violetta was kind of like bothering her until she gives up. In a way, he did a similar thing with Francesca in season 3, but there he had good intentions, while with Violetta he had bad intentions because he was working with Ludmilla. I think that if we in this scenario would do the same route as canon and have Leonetta be endgame, then I think that Tomas, by in the middle of season 2, kind of feel like his feelings for Violetta has faded, and the two of them kind of get this friendship. And then Tomas maybe is a unlikely wingman for Leon. But then you can ask, if Tomas wouldn't end up with Violetta, who would he end up with? Well, the show has a tendency to not wanting anyone to end up single unless they are undressed. So we have to look at the other alternatives. The most obvious one would be Francesca. The thing is, in season 2, she is dating Marco. And she deserves to have a boyfriend like Marco. Because Tomas treated her like shit when they dated in season 1. So she needed a guy that would do anything for her and would be like a Ken to her Barbie. And I don't want Marco and Tomas to have a beef. Marco doesn't deserve to have a love triangle. They kind of tried to have a love triangle between him and Fran and Diego in season 3, but the thing was that Marco was so busy with himself that he didn't even notice, and he was totally okay with his best friend and his ex-girlfriend starting to date, which I also think is weird because honestly, the whole Diego and Francesca hiding thing in season 3, I feel like it would make it a lot more sense if they tried to hide from Marco rather than hiding from Violetta, because Violetta didn't care at all. But Marco would have had a more reason to care, but he left. And yeah, right, Marco left, but he didn't leave in season 2, so Tomas absolutely cannot touch Francesca in season 2. However, could he touch her in season 3? Ew. I will never say touch her like that again, ew. Well, I will go into this further when I come to another scenario, but I don't see a rivalry between Tomas and Diego ending up very well. And I also think that Francesca has raised her standards for every season. For Francesca, what she needed in season 2 was a guy like Marco, but in season 3 she needed more of an action maybe? I'm not sure, but I remember that everything that Marco did in season 3 she didn't really appreciate in the same way that she did in season 2, and perhaps she needed someone like Diego. I am not sure, but I know for a fact that Francesca would have raised her standards so much by season 3 that she would never even attempt to give Tomas a chance. So our other option here is Ludmilla. And you all know that I think Ludmilla is a lesbian, but that's beside the point for this, because this is canon where everyone ends up with the opposite gender no matter what. Ludmilla in canon, when she is supposedly straight or something, did like Tomas. Her whole beef with Violetta was because she liked Tomas. And so in season 2, it would make pretty much sense if Her plan of destroying Violetta's life also meant that she could get Tomas back. And in this scenario where Violetta would choose Leon, it would be way easier for Ludmilla to get Tomas back. The question is only if Tomas likes her back, and I'm not sure that he does, but maybe he learns to. Maybe he settles with Ludmilla when he has no other option. But then we need to discuss Federico, because who would Federico end up with in that case? And the only way I can solve this is that in this scenario, Federico is only a character that appears for some episodes each season, so he's more of a guest role, and thus there's not the same pressure that he needs to be endgame with anyone, so he ends up single. So in the end, we have Leonetta endgame, everything is the same there, and we have Tomas and Ludmilla as an endgame, I guess. But what if we go to scenario 2, where again everything is the same? Tomas stays in season 2 and everything that happens in season 2 and season 3 is the same, but this time Tomas and Violetta are endgame. Well, I believe that they would again try to play a bit of who would Violetta end up with in season 2, and maybe here they would still have Leon and Violetta be together by the end of season 2, but then in season 3, as they break up, Violetta goes back to Tomas and chooses him as her true love. But also for Violetta and Tomas to be endgame, I think that they need to have some more dating moments in season 2 as well, because otherwise it would be like, oh, we had an entire season where we were just friends, now we're gonna date again. So in this scenario, it's instead that Leon that feels like he is forgetting about Violetta, and him and Tomas are unlikely friends as they bond over their hatred over Diego. Leon is really good at defending Diego, and he probably defends Diego against both Tomas and Violetta. And maybe he helps Tomas getting with Violetta too. And Leon's endgame in this scenario is, of course, with Lara, because who else? There is literally no one else. Who else would he end up with? Jerry? No, of course not. For Leon in that case, I think in season 3, the drama would be that him and Lara are still dating, but then Jerry comes to the motocross field and bothers them, and then she and Lara have a beef. I also want to say, I think season 3 would have been better if Lara had stayed in general, because in canon, maybe she didn't need to be Leon's love interest season 3 anymore, but she could have been there and had a beef with Jerry, because Jerry at the start of season 3 worked at the motocross field for some reason, and Lara should have been there to tell her off. I miss Lara so much in season 3, honestly. The only thing with season 2 is that I guess that in this scenario, Tomas would have been the one to have saved Violetta in episode 75 when she cries on stage. And they would not have sung Podemos together, because that is her and Leon's song, okay? No, they would have sung Te Creo or one of Tomas's songs. But I also have no idea how they could win the dance competition, because Tomas can't dance. So either he'd magically be able to dance so they can go to Madrid, or they scrap the storyline completely and instead have something happen in Buenos Aires. And I think in season 3 they would have some kind of breakup before they end up together, but I have no idea what they would break up about. But at the same time, Tomas is a whiny bitch. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna be biased here, but it's hard. But I feel like they would break up because of a really stupid reason, even stupider than whatever Leon and Violetta broke up about in season 3. And what I am thinking is that instead of the Roxy plot, it's Tomas that dresses up and spies on Violetta. Because maybe he thinks that something is going on between her and Clement or something. And so he creates an alter ego that he uses to spy on her. And then she falls in love with his alter ego. And maybe it would be like a plot twist for us as the audience. Because maybe we don't find out that it is Tomas. And then we get it revealed. And after the whole alter ego thing is over and they are mad at each other for a while, they do a similar route to what Violetta and Leon did in the other half of season 3, where they sort of like start to feel very attracted to each other, but they won't admit it, and they try to like be friends for a while before eventually learning that they can't, and they end up dating again. And they're endgame, and it's cute and whatever. God, as I am saying this, I am so glad that is not what ended up happening. Also, I would have been so much more mad if Tomas was an alter ego spying on Violetta and like hurting her feelings, because while the Roxy plot was really, really stupid, since we saw it from Violetta's perspective, we also saw like how she tried to get out of it, but then she ended up in a bigger mess because Gregorio wanted her and Fausto to be in his show, and so she kind of tried to get out of it, but ended up creating a whole new madness, and then it was too late to really get out of it. But had it been Tomas, we probably wouldn't have seen it from his perspective, and so he would just have come off as an asshole. At least according to me, but again, maybe I'm more biased to Violetta, so I can forgive her more easily for being stupid than when I can with Tomas. But the third scenario here is one where Leon left after season 1, so he's not here, and it's only Tomas. And I want to say right off the bat that if Leon wasn't there, Tomas would have had no chance against Diego. Now again, Diego and Violetta would not be endgame because they aren't meant to be endgame, but Tomas would have had such a hard time because Diego would have been like a bully. He would have like crushed Tomas within the first 5 episodes basically. I also think that Violetta would have like the worst year of her life when not only Diego but also Tomas, 2 of the ones that like to break into her house the most, having 2 of those boys like coming into your house, always knocking on your door, breaking into your room, she would be so fucking tired. And in this scenario, I think Tomas would have had a hard time like defending himself, and maybe we would have rooted for him simply because we felt bad for him, because Diego would literally like throw him in the garbage several times. So what would have happened in the end would be that it would kind of be like the bad boy that the main character is dating, because she isn't realizing that the shy boy next door is actually the one she needs to date. So yeah, in season 2, I guess it would kind of be like Tomas getting like stepped on by Diego so much and like whined so much about it, and eventually Violetta would be like, you are so mean to Tomas, it's not okay, you're not a good guy at all. And at the same time, I think Ludmilla would try to like snatch Tomas again, but as I said, I'm not sure if he is that into her. Maybe him and Ludmilla would have like a short dating period again, and they would like repeat the same storylines from season 1, but eventually Ludmilla would fall for Federico, and so kind of forget about Tomas a bit. And then season 3 would basically be the same as I described in scenario 2. So that was the 3 scenarios I could come up with what would happen if Tomas stayed. And to be honest, the way the show went, I am really glad that he didn't stay. Because I feel like it would have been a lot of a repetition of season 1, especially if Leon also stayed. But you guys that really love Tomas and Violetta, maybe you have other thoughts about this. Because it's hard for me to be nice against a character that I genuinely never really liked. I literally remember being 11 years old, and the second Tomas says that the kiss you gave Leon was my kiss, was the second 11-year-old me was like, okay, I don't like you anymore. But what are your theories of what would happen if Tomas stayed? Leave a comment, because comments are fun, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.